Hi, everybody. Really happy to be here today. So I'm going to talk about a particular type of inequality. Inequality is unfortunately a reality in our society, and I want to talk about institutional inequality that affects particular groups of people. As many people in the room might be aware, if you are Black or Aboriginal in Canada, you are more likely to be stopped by the police than other Canadians. You're more likely to go to prison. You're more likely to drop out of school. You're more likely to be unemployed. And as many people in the room are aware, I'm sure, you're also more likely as a child or a parent to be involved in the child welfare system. Now, it's hard sometimes to really understand what role race or racial profiling plays in a lot of these institutional inequalities. But when you go through these things and you see that other people who look like you also go through them more than people who don't look like you, it's hard to discount the role that might play in shaping your experience in society. I myself have gone through some of these inequalities personally. I have been stopped by the police. I was suspended from school. I was streamed into the applied or college system in my high school without knowing the consequences that might have on my future. I've lived in Black and brown neighborhoods in the GTA, and consequently, a lot of people I knew growing up wound up in prison or as high school dropouts. And so when going through this stuff and seeing these things around me affecting my communities and my neighborhoods, it was not just something you experience as an individual, but it's also something that you feel is a statement on your place in society. Again, because you see that inequality affect other people who share what you look like or share where your parents come from. And when you have that feeling, it's hard not to feel isolated. It's hard not to feel like your personal challenges are somehow a statement as to whether you belong or not and what your potential is like in your society. It's hard to feel like you live in a place that can fairly benefit all people equally, regardless of what they look like. So in going through these experiences and seeing these things play out, I became, I would say, a pessimistic person. If you talked to me 10 years ago, when I was finishing high school, you would have seen someone who had no faith that we lived in a place that could improve. You would have seen someone who had been resigned to feeling oppressed and feeling like life was unfair. And it took me a while, a lot of growing pains to get out of that. And I think the biggest change for me was when I went to law school. I went to Yale Law School in the US, and a big part of my experience was learning the skills and the ideas necessary to turn my lived experience into actual initiative, into actual efforts that might address some of these inequalities. So not only could I understand these things better and understand maybe where they come from, but I might actually know how to impact them. And by the time I finished law school, I felt like I had changed from a person who was sitting on the sidelines and watching a game play out that I had a lot invested in, that I had bet my life on this game, but I wasn't involved in it at all. And by the time I finished law school, I felt like now I'm ready to play myself. And I came back to Toronto after I finished, and the first issue that kind of caught my interest because of some of the experiences I had as a young person here is policing and racial profiling in particular. And so when I came back, as I'm sure you may have seen over the last 2 years, this issue has been all over the news. There's been tragedies and there's been heartbreak, not just in Canada, but also what we see on the news every day from in the US. And what I realized was that although there's many ways you can get involved in an issue, a key part for me was making sure I could figure out a way to look at these inequalities, but not to feel oppressed by them and to not be discouraged by them. That there might be a way that I can actually positively affect these things without also feeling like I'm less likely to make a difference at all. And so our strategy became, we assembled a great team of people, youth from different priority neighborhoods from across Toronto. And our main goal was to make sure that people understood what we were experiencing. And so we would meet with police officers regularly. And these were meetings with police officers who weren't really sure what to expect when they came to talk to us. And getting them to sit down with youth who grew up with a genuine fear and distrust and anger at police officers, largely because they had seen what I had referred to before as those institutional inequalities their whole lives. And what we were able to accomplish over the course of several months is actual relationship building between officers and these youth. And those relationships are critical, not just because police officers can be incredible resources for children who are in vulnerable situations if they need something, as I'm sure many of you are aware, but also because they were able to share their lived experience both as officers and as young people and come up with better policy ideas. And that, to me, if I were to sum up what my life's purpose has been, is that. I want to make people who feel like they've been negatively affected by a policy, who live in what I would call the gap between policy and law on paper and policy and law in practice on the ground. People who live in that gap might be able to turn their negative experiences into an opportunity to positively affect something. And that's what we've been able to accomplish with policing. And I'll tell you, there's setbacks every day. Every day you turn on the news and you see something that looks terrible and frightening. It has an incredible impact on the young people in this city as well. And so it's hard to build momentum, but the thing that we always come down to is, do we have the optimism to actually show up? You might not feel like the ball's moving forward, you might not feel like you're getting the progress that you need, but if you keep that optimism to show up and you're willing to share your stories, share your experiences, and hold policymakers accountable to that gap, then that's where you can have an impact. So on this day, where we're sitting here and we're talking about the child welfare system, and we've got an incredible mix of diverse perspectives in the room, one thing that I hope we think about is the broader picture to solving a lot of these problems. That making adjustments to the child welfare system, improving how people experience the child welfare system, whether as parents or they're as children, is not enough. There's a big, complex system of inequalities that we need to think about that affect a number of issues, not just, I see I got some believers here, yeah. But not just when it comes to police, but also with our schools, also with our jobs. Every policy priority that we have in our country has a disproportionate impact on people, and people disproportionately benefit from them. And those disproportionalities are reflected in the child welfare system. So my hope is that for the people in attendance who are in care, formerly in care, I hope that you will take this message of optimism and engagement and understand that there are seats at the table waiting for you to come fill them. And there's a really important role for you to play. And not just in advising what we might do with this particular system and with the challenges that child welfare faces, but you also have incredible insights into many other aspects of society. So I hope, like me, you will go out there and get the training, get the skills, and get the experience, because mixing those things with your lived experience will have an incredible impact on the world. Thank you very much.